Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another segment of our learning journey. If you haven't already, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Creating this content takes a great deal of time, and your support, primarily through likes, sends a clear message that you value this work and want to see more of it. I promise to continually improve the quality of what I deliver to you. Today, we will explore Jamaican underworld, crime, colonialism, and social upheaval, 1930s to the 1960s. I will also introduce to you what many people believe was the original rude boy. We discussed today's crime situation, but the truth be told, crime has always been a part of Jamaica's context. So let's get started. Between 1930 and 1960, Jamaica went through major changes while still under British colonial rule. The country faced a global economic depression, intense labor protests, and rising calls for independence. This was also a time when political parties were just forming and competing for power. All of these events influenced how crime was understood and handled. Some people became well known or notorious, not just because of what they did, but because their actions reflected bigger issues in society, like poverty, colonial control, or the fight for freedom. These crimes weren't just random bad acts. They were shaped by deeper social and political struggles. This report looks at the conditions that led to crime during this time. It highlights famous criminals like Vincent Rhyging Martin and examines how political leaders like Alexander Bustamante were linked to criminal accusations. It also discusses how women were treated in the legal system. Between 1930 and 1960, crime in Jamaica was shaped by deep social, political, and economic issues. During this time, the country was still under British colonial rule, and the struggles people faced, like poverty, unfair treatment, and lack of opportunities, played a big role in how crime developed and how people reacted to it. In the 1930s, Jamaica's economy was hit hard by the global depression. Most of the wealth was controlled by British plantation owners and companies, especially in the sugar industry. As prices dropped and profits shrank, they cut jobs and slashed wages. Many Jamaican workers, especially those without land, were left jobless and hungry. The cities couldn't offer much help either because unemployment was rising everywhere. The government, focused on protecting businesses and exports, did little to help the suffering people. This made many Jamaicans feel abandoned and angry. With few legal ways to survive, some turned to illegal activities. Violence became a more common way to deal with problems, both for people and for the state. Things came to a head with a wave of labor rebellions across the Caribbean, Jamaica included. The most intense moments were in 1938 at places like the Surge Island and Frome Sugar Estates. Workers were fed up with low pay, harsh conditions, and unfair treatment. They started with peaceful strikes, but were often met with police violence. At Frome, police shot at protesters, killing 4 and injuring 9. In response, protesters burned cane fields. These events showed that many people believed protest, even violent protest, was the only way to be heard. Meanwhile, the colonial government felt justified in using force to protect the economy and its power. This back and forth between protest and crackdown helped build a culture where using violence seemed like a normal way to respond to injustice or enforce control, shaping crime and public attitudes in the years to come. After World War II, Jamaica saw some economic growth, especially between 1950 and 1955. But many serious problems remained. Unemployment stayed high, income gaps grew, especially between people working in farming and those in other jobs, and land ownership was very unequal. A small number of landowners controlled most of the farmland, while most farmers had only small plots that couldn't support their families. Urban poverty and crime. In cities like Kingston, these struggles led to the rise of poor neighborhoods or shanty towns, such as Trenchtown and Bacco Wall, which had existed since the 1930s. Life in these areas was hard, and many people lived in deep poverty. This environment gave rise to a scuffler culture, people doing whatever they could to survive, even if it meant turning to crime. This included petty theft, prostitution, and hustling. These tough living conditions, caused by years of colonial neglect and lack of opportunity, created the perfect environment for more serious crime to grow. People from these communities were often pulled into organized crime or violence, either to make money or just to survive. This era laid the groundwork for the rise of more well-known and dangerous criminal figures later on. The period between 1930 and 1960 in Jamaica saw the rise of several male figures whose actions, whether through brazen criminality or entanglement in politically charged violence, etched them into the annals of Jamaican notoriety. Their stories reflect the societal tensions, the nature of colonial justice, and the power of media in shaping public perception. A. Vincent Ivanhoe Martin, Rhyging, the archetypal outlaw, mid-late 1940s. Vincent Martin, born in Linstead, St. Catherine in 1924, and better known by his fearsome moniker Rhyging, stands as one of Jamaica's most legendary criminal figures, often regarded as the original rude boy. His life of crime began in his teenage years after relocating to Kingston. Despite a physical description as short, slim, and possessing an effeminate voice, Martin cultivated a reputation for extreme violence. His criminal record commenced at age 14 with an arrest for wounding, for which he received a whipping. Subsequent arrests for wounding and larceny led to a 6-month jail term. Upon release, he became involved with a criminal gang and adopted various aliases, including Ivanhoe, Alan Ladd, and Captain Midnight. A 1946 arrest for robbery marked the beginning of his penchant for self-dramatization. He insisted on defending himself in court, irritating the judge with grandiose and lengthy speeches. After serving a year, he was released only to commit another robbery, earning him a 5-year sentence quickly. Rhyging's notoriety exploded after his escape from the General Penitentiary on April 30th, 1948. This escape triggered an intense, several-month period of eluding police, culminating in a dramatic 6-week crime spree primarily in West Kingston. It was during this manhunt that the Daily Gleaner newspaper played a crucial role, publishing lurid and sensational reports that popularized his nickname, Rhyging. The term Rhyging, also Rhygin in Jamaican patois, meant wild, hot, or bad. In underworld jargon, it signified a man always on top. His 1948 crime spree was marked by extreme violence. In August, when police attempted to capture him at the Carib Hotel based on an informant's tip, Rhyging, who was in a room with a woman, shot his way out, killing Detective Lewis and wounding another policeman, H.E. Earl, and a retired officer, ex-Sergeant Gallimore, who was assisting. The killing of Detective Lewis prompted the then mayor of Kingston, Alexander Bustamante, to launch a major manhunt. Bustamante himself was a pallbearer at Lewis's funeral. The day after killing Detective Lewis, Rhyging murdered Lucille Tibby Young, the girlfriend of Eric Goldson, the man he believed had informed on him. A few days later, he shot and killed an associate, Jonathan Thomas, and subsequently attempted to kill another man, Selvin Maxwell, who managed to disarm him before Rhyging escaped by stealing Maxwell's car. He was also suspected of several robberies during this period, possibly to finance an escape from Jamaica, including the White Horse's Inn at Mary Brown's Corner. The manhunt for Rhyging ended on September 9, 1948. After hiding near his childhood home in St. Catherine and then fleeing to Lime Cay, his whereabouts were again betrayed to the police, who swooped in and killed him. The legend of Rhyging was significantly fueled by the extensive and often sensationalized media coverage, particularly by the Daily Gleaner. He became an anti-hero, a folk legend for the impoverished and dispossessed residents of Jamaica's 1940s ghettos, drawing comparisons to figures like John Dillinger or Bonnie and Clyde. In the 1940s, Jamaica's politics were intense and sometimes violent. The growing rivalry between the Jamaica Labour Party, JLP, and the People's National Party, PNP, didn't just stay in Parliament. It often spilled into the streets. One dramatic example was the 1946 trial of Alexander Bustamante, leader of the JLP, and Frank Pixley, a government minister. Bustamante and Pixley manslaughter trial, 1946. Violence broke out between supporters of the two political parties, and 2 men were killed. Bustamante and Pixley were arrested and charged with manslaughter. Their trial was high profile and emotional, but they were found not guilty in 1947. While some saw this as justice, others believed it showed that powerful politicians could get away with serious crimes. It raised concerns that politics and violence were becoming too closely connected, and that political leaders might use their influence to avoid consequences. This case is important because it showed how easily political rivalry could lead to violence, and how the justice system could appear biased when dealing with top officials. It also hinted at the beginning of garrison politics, where politics, power, and force became tightly linked in Jamaican life. Other violent incidents and military related crimes. Besides political violence, the earlier years of this period also saw military related crimes that reflected deep racial and colonial tensions. One case involved a black Jamaican war veteran who killed another soldier. Even though many people supported a campaign to spare his life, he was executed. This showed how harshly the colonial system treated black Jamaicans even if they had served in war. In another case, a British soldier was killed during a fight with Jamaican civilians. In response, white British soldiers rioted in Kingston but faced little punishment. Meanwhile, the Jamaican man accused in the killing was defended by Norman Manley, who would later lead the PMP. Manley cleverly used the jury's biases about race and class to win a not guilty verdict. These stories reveal how unfair the colonial justice system was. Black Jamaicans, especially poor ones, were often treated more harshly than whites. This uneven justice shaped how people saw crime and punishment and made it clear that race and class could determine your fate in court. Together, these examples show that crime, politics, and inequality were deeply connected in colonial Jamaica, and that these issues would continue to shape the country for years to come. Female criminality, particularly linked to Obeah, was also prominent. Obeah, an African-based spiritual and healing practice, was criminalized by colonial laws. Women like Beatrice Hanson and Satira Reid were prosecuted for spiritual work, often combining African traditions with Christian elements. These prosecutions were sometimes politically or personally motivated rather than purely legal. Media coverage by the Daily Gleaner sensationalized these cases, shaping public fear and stereotyping. By the 1940s, fewer prosecutions occurred, but laws like the 1940 Undesirable Publications Act suggested a shift towards suppressing spiritual knowledge and controlling indigenous cultural expressions, reinforcing colonial authority over local belief systems. Between the 1940s and early 1960s, Jamaica saw the rise of politically driven violence, street gangs, and the emergence of the rude boy culture. Political leaders like Alexander Bustamante encouraged intimidation through partisan enforcers, laying the foundation for future gang violence. In impoverished urban areas like Trenchtown, marginalized youth formed scuffler groups to survive, engaging in petty crime and forming proto-gangs. By the late 1950s, rude boys emerged, rebellious youth known for sharp dress, violence, and ties to sound system culture. These developments reflected deep social inequalities and created a lasting connection between politics, poverty, music, and organized crime. Thanks for watching, and some sources for this presentation can be found in the video description of this video. Until next time.